Hey, what's up guys? Tyler here with Secure Team. What you're looking at now is a picture of the solar sail deployed on the Japanese probe that was sent and has successfully reached the planet Venus. And we're going to talk more about that in a moment. But first, we have found what we think and what could very likely be a UFO that thus far, because the images are so new, has not been talked about anywhere else. And as you're seeing in this image, it's pretty straightforward. This is an image taken by the probe as the sail is deploying, and to the right, sticking out of the darkness, we see what looks like possibly multiple objects. We see almost a formation of, it reminds me of almost like flower petals, kind of circling, a flower, and then below it we have these two smaller dots of light underneath it. And there seems to be a little bit of sort of like a glowing aura around this object, which, again, it's in the background. It definitely does not look like anything on the probe, but again, I would not doubt that because we know that there are aliens in our solar system, and we know for sure we're being visited, and Venus is very close to Earth, and I wouldn't doubt that there would be some activity out there at Venus, especially because Venus, if you've noticed, is very seldomly spoken about. And that kind of makes you wonder, because you never hear about Venus. You hear about Jupiter, you hear about Saturn, you hear about Pluto, you hear about Mars, but you rarely hear about Venus, and you rarely hear the government or NASA talking about Venus. It's almost like there's always been sort of like a media blackout when it comes to Venus. And when something does come up about Venus, it's almost like quickly shuffled off and forgotten. So it almost seems like maybe there is something more to Venus. We're always talking about these planets that are extremely far away from us, the farthest planets out in the outer reaches of our solar system, and the anomalous things that happen there. But then we have a planet like Venus that is one of the closest planets to us. It's literally, in space terms and distances, right next to us. And we never talk about that, and we never hear anything about that. So could it be that there is a reason for this? There's an old joke that women are from Mars and men are from Venus. And there may be some sort of weird, twisted truth in that. Because Venus is always kind of kept on the down low. And it's definitely an awesome and mysterious planet, and we're going to talk to you about some of the strange things about Venus today. But again, we just wanted to show you this photograph first, so let me know what you guys think about that. And take into consideration what we were just talking about this possible media blackout about Venus, because there very likely could be something out there. We don't know a lot about Venus, and we haven't been told a lot about Venus, but we're going to go into that. So basically, the Japanese have just had success in getting their spacecraft to Venus. The spacecraft arrived 5 years after the first try. And we're talking about Japan's Akatsuko spacecraft, which has arrived in orbit around Venus 5 years after an engine failure thwarted their first attempt in sending this probe out. And this is a $300 million mission that was launched in May 2010. Along with JAXA's Ikaros spacecraft, which became the first probe ever to deploy and use a solar sail in interplanetary space. So after 5 long years, this probe has finally reached Venus and sent back the very first images of this amazingly beautiful and dangerous planet. Those images you're seeing here. And if you don't know, NASA has actually already sent a probe to Venus, and we've had pictures of it, but it's always good to have more footage of this planet, because we don't have many. And you're seeing these images here of the planet's extremely strange cloud formations that are actually very different than what researchers had originally predicted. And these unusual, almost bow-shaped cloud formations have appeared to rotate in sync with the surface and not the atmosphere. And if you don't know, Venus is a very hot, active planet. covered in volcanoes, and you can tell right off the bat that the surface features of Venus are having a direct effect on its cloud cover. And we're going to talk about some of the strange things about Venus that you may not know. And as we just mentioned, volcanoes, Venetian volcanoes as they're called. There are more volcanoes on Venus than on any other planet in the solar system. More than 1,600 on its surface, and many more that are just too small for us to see. And although many scientists believe them to be dormant, studies are showing that there may be a big group of them that are still definitely active. So you can imagine what the surface of this thing looks like. It's almost like hell on Earth, because Venus is almost the exact size of Earth, covered in these raging volcanoes. Then there's the fact that a day on Venus lasts 243 Earth days, and it's extremely hot. The atmosphere is made of carbon dioxide, and the atmosphere is basically going through a massive greenhouse effect, which is warming the surface of Venus, in turn warming back up the atmosphere to scorching temperatures of up to 870 degrees Fahrenheit, which basically means that this is a surface that is hot enough to melt lead due to its runaway greenhouse atmosphere. And that is a direct quote from Sue Smakar, a scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So Venus is basically a massive pressure cooker, and the air pressure on Venus is almost 100 times higher than the pressure at sea level here on Earth. So basically, what that means is that the pressure, if you were standing on Venus, is like the water pressure that you would withstand about a mile under Earth's ocean. And it's an extremely windy planet, where the winds across this thing reach up to 450 miles an hour, which is much faster than the fastest tornado you could find on Earth. Now, speaking of possible alien activity on Venus, the Soviet Union has actually landed on the surface of Venus and taken pictures. And these pictures have had a lot of mystery around them. And this all happened when the Venera 13 space probe sent by the Russians, when the Venera 13 spacecraft, actually there's two, Venera 13 and 14, traveled to Venus, landed on its surface, and took a panoramic shot so you can see 360 degrees around the probe. And what they saw in these beautiful images showing this dark, black, rocky, hot surface, which actually melted the probe after it had landed and it was on the surface for a few hours. And they captured images of what looked like these small robotic creatures on the ground moving on the surface as they snapped pictures. An image from that you're seeing here. And this is the object in question we're zooming in on here. And it almost looks sort of like a mechanical crab. Here is a higher resolution image showing the object. You can see this beautiful background along with the sky and the rocks, and it's just amazing. And they also found in the images on the surface of something that looks almost like a scorpion, which you're seeing in this image here, that a Russian scientist has claimed that it shows a scorpion-like life form on the surface of Venus, sort of blending in. Now, they later came out and tried to say, well, this was just a piece of the probe, but that didn't explain the reason why this so-called piece of the probe began moving around as they snapped pictures, long after the probe had landed. So, again, typical cover-up. They always have an excuse, but nonetheless, these are some amazing images. I think there's much more to Venus than we have been told, and we will definitely follow all of these new images. Hopefully, the Japanese are not as secretive as other space agencies. So, let me know what you guys think. It's an amazing planet, very close to Earth, very close to the size of Earth, has an atmosphere, and looks to have some very strange things on the surface. So, again, we have this new image showing a possible UFO watching the probe. It's not the first time that we've seen images where there have been alien probes photographed that seem to be watching the probes that we've sent that are taking the images. So, again, I think we're all watching each other, and it's just kind of comical when you think about it. So, let me know what you guys think. Be sure to stick right here with Secure Team. Watch our last video if you haven't seen it yet of some amazing up-close, clear UFO footage captured in Kansas. It's going to blow your mind. And as always, subscribe, like the video on your way out. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you back soon. Stay safe, guys.